The Navy SEAL wasn't buying it, not the quiet confidence in her voice, not the way she'd sized up the room the moment she walked in, and certainly not the story she'd just told. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They were in a dingy harbor bar on the edge of Norfolk, the kind of place where the floorboards stuck to your boots and every patron had something to hide. The man's name was Chief Petty Officer Dean Ashford, 6 deployments, 3 citations for valor, and the skeptical stare of a man who'd seen too many wannabes try to impress him with war stories. "You expect me to believe you were there?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "The Black Reef op was classified above my pay grade, and I was in the unit that planned it." Across from him, the woman didn't flinch. Her name was Cara Lorne. Her dark hair was tied back, her clothes plain, her eyes steady. There was nothing in her posture that screamed military, until you noticed she hadn't once let her back touch the wall. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Cara reached for her drink, took a slow sip, and then set it down with deliberate care. "You want proof?" she asked. Ashford's smirk said yes, but his eyes said, "Go ahead, make a fool of yourself." Cara didn't argue, she simply rolled up her left sleeve. The scar was ugly and deliberate, jagged tissue that formed a distinct pattern, running from her wrist to the inside of her elbow. Ashford's smirk died instantly. He knew that pattern. It wasn't just a scar, it was a brand, the kind only one unit in the world carried. It was the mark of the Ghost Tide, an off-the-books strike team so secret their own military didn't admit they existed. Ashford had only ever heard whispers about them, impossible missions, deniable kills, disappearances in war zones, no one claimed responsibility for. If Cara wore that mark, it meant she'd survived something even SEALs didn't come back from. "What's your angle?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Cara's smile was faint, almost sad. "My angle," she said, "is that someone is hunting down everyone who was at Black Reef. They've already killed 3 of mine. You're on their list, whether you believe me or not." Ashford's eyes narrowed. "Why tell me?" "Because I'm not here to save you," she said. "I'm here to find the one who ordered the hit. And if you're smart, you'll help me." The bar's door banged open behind them. 2 men stepped inside, eyes scanning the room too deliberately to be casual. Cara didn't look back, she just rested her hand lightly on the grip of the pistol hidden beneath her jacket. Ashford caught the motion and finally understood. Whatever she'd been through, whatever proof she carried, this wasn't a story for drinks and small talk. It was a countdown, and the clock had just started. Ashford didn't have time to process the full weight of Cara's words. The 2 men at the door had already made their decision, heads down, shoulders forward, cutting a line through the crowded bar toward their table. They weren't there for the beer. Cara's voice was low, barely carrying over the hum of conversation. "They're not here to talk." Ashford glanced around. The bartender had disappeared into the back. The regulars at the counter suddenly found their drinks fascinating. This was about to get messy. The first man reached them, a mountain of muscle in a faded leather jacket. His hand went for his waistband, too slow. Cara's palm shot up under his chin, snapping his head back, while her other hand grabbed his wrist and twisted hard. The pistol he'd been reaching for clattered to the floor. Ashford was on his feet, before the second man could react. He pivoted around the chair, catching the attacker's arm mid-draw and slamming an elbow into his ribs. The man grunted, doubled over, and Ashford wrenched the gun free. The first man came back swinging, his fist slicing through the air toward Cara's jaw. She ducked low, drove her shoulder into his midsection, and used his momentum to hurl him across the table. Bottles shattered, and someone screamed. Ashford fired a single round into the ceiling, the sharp crack freezing the room. Out he barked at the patrons. They didn't need telling twice. Chairs scraped and boots pounded as the bar emptied, leaving only the 4 of them. The second man tried to flank Cara. She sidestepped, grabbed the edge of the overturned table, and flipped it into him like a battering ram. He went down hard, gasping for air. Ashford moved to cover the door, pistol raised. The first man staggered to his feet again, but Cara was already on him, twisting his arm behind his back and driving his face into the wall. The impact rattled the glasses on the shelves. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man spat blood, then laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "You already know." Her eyes narrowed. "Say the name." His laugh turned into a cough. "They call him Wraith." Ashford's brow furrowed. He'd heard that name once before, years ago, in a debrief that was scrubbed from official records before he even left the room. It was a ghost story told in the teams, a contractor turned phantom, a man who could make entire squads vanish without leaving a trace. Before they could press him further, the man slammed his head backward into Kara's face. She stumbled, just enough for him to break free, and dive through the open window, beside the jukebox. Ashford caught sight of a black SUV pulling away from the alley outside. They've got backup. Kara wiped blood from her lip, already moving toward the door. Then we follow. Ashford hesitated. He didn't know her, didn't trust her, but the name Wraith was enough to override every instinct telling him to walk away. He racked the pistol slide, checked the mag, and stepped out into the wet night. The SUV's taillights were fading into the fog beyond the docks. Kara was already sliding into the driver's seat of a battered pickup parked outside. "Coming, Chief?" she called. Ashford climbed in without another word. The tires screeched, the engine roared, and they plunged into the chase, two strangers bound together by a name neither of them could afford to ignore. The pickup's headlights carved pale tunnels through the mist, the fog swallowing everything beyond 50 yards. Ashford kept his eyes on the red glow of the SUV's taillights, flashing in and out of view as it wove through the waterfront streets. Kara drove like she'd been born behind the wheel, smooth on the curves, ruthless on the straights. She cut corners so close that the side mirror scraped brick, bounced the truck off potholes without hesitation, and never once lifted her foot when the road narrowed. "Who is Wraith to you?" Ashford asked, bracing a hand against the dash as she swung the truck around a blind turn. Her eyes stayed locked on the road. "He's the reason I have the scar." Ashford didn't push. Not yet. The truck's engine growled as she dropped a gear and surged forward. The SUV ahead swerved, tires squealing as it took a hard right down a service lane. Kara followed without slowing, the walls of shipping containers looming high on both sides. The air smelled of rust, diesel and the salt-heavy tang of the nearby bay. Suddenly the SUV's brake lights flared, and it skidded sideways, blocking the lane. Two doors flew open, figures in black spilled out, rifles already raised. "Down!" Ashford shouted, grabbing Kara by the shoulder and pulling her low. Rounds tore into the windshield, spider webbing the glass. Kara yanked the wheel hard, sending the pickup into a violent slide that spun the truck sideways behind the cover of a container stack. The gunfire cut off, replaced by the slap of boots on asphalt. Ashford popped the passenger door, sliding out low and moving toward the gap between containers. He'd played this game before, draw them in, take them apart in the choke point. The first man rounded the corner at a run. Ashford caught him by the barrel, twisted and drove the butt of the rifle into his jaw. The man dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Kara was already moving around the far side, flanking. Two more came at her. She fired twice, clean controlled shots that dropped them before they could adjust. Ashford reached the SUV in time to see the driver jump back behind the wheel. The engine roared and the vehicle surged forward, tires spitting gravel. Kara slid into the passenger seat of the pickup, before Ashford could even shout. "Go!" she barked. He didn't need telling twice. He floored it, the truck fishtailing before biting into the wet pavement and tearing after the retreating SUV. For 2 miles they chased, the fog thickening until it was like driving through wet concrete. Finally, the SUV turned into a derelict shipyard, weaving between skeletal cranes and rusted hulls. Then nothing, the taillights vanished. Ashford slowed, scanning the shadows. "They're here somewhere." Kara's voice was calm, but there was a tension in it now. "They won't stay. Wraith doesn't linger unless he wants to be found." "You think he's here?" Ashford asked. Her jaw tightened. "I know he is. This is where he marked me." Before Ashford could ask what she meant, a voice drifted through the fog, amplified, metallic, coming from everywhere at once. "Nice to see you again, Kara." Ashford's pulse kicked hard. It wasn't a ghost story anymore. It was a hunt, and the hunter had just stepped into the open. The fog in the shipyard seemed to thicken with Wraith's voice, each syllable sliding through the mist like a knife under skin. It was impossible to tell where it came from, one moment from the cranes above, the next from the gutted hulls, looming on either side. Kara stepped out of the pickup, her movements slow, deliberate. Ashford followed, pistol drawn, his eyes scanning every shadow, every opening between the rusting steel. "I thought you'd be halfway across the world by now." Kara called into the fog. Her voice was steady, but Ashford could see the subtle shift in her stance, weight on the balls of her feet, shoulders loose, ready to explode into motion. "You know me better than that," Wraith's voice replied, calm and almost amused. "When I start something, I finish it. And you, Kara, you're unfinished business." Ashford pivoted toward a faint clink of metal on the far side of a shipping crate, but there was nothing, just the echo of it fading into the mist. "Why now?" Kara demanded. "You had your chance years ago." There was a pause, and then Wraith's tone turned colder. "Black Reef changed everything. You survived when you weren't supposed to. You kept the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. And now I'm here to take it back." Ashford shot Kara a quick glance. What's he talking about? She didn't answer. Instead she scanned the cranes overhead, her eyes tracking the skeletal arms vanishing into the mist. That's when Ashford saw it, faint red glows flickering in the fog. Laser sights, multiple, all converging. Kara, she moved before he could finish, grabbing his arm and yanking him behind the skeletal frame of a cargo loader, just as the first volley of suppressed shots shredded the space they'd been standing in. Ashford returned fire blindly, rounds sparking off steel. He heard the slap of boots circling fast. 3 o'clock, Kara shouted. Ashford spun, dropping the first man who emerged from the mist, his suppressed SMG clattering to the ground. Another silhouette came low from the left. Kara snapped a kick into his knee, the crack audible even over the gunfire, then drove her elbow into his temple. He crumpled without a sound. Wraith's voice floated down again, still maddeningly calm. "You've still got the edge, Kara. I almost missed it." Ashford gritted his teeth. "Show yourself, coward." The reply was a low chuckle. "Oh, I will. But first, let's see how much she told you about that scar." Ashford caught the briefest flicker of something in Kara's eyes. Not fear, exactly, but a guarded pain. He filed it away, knowing this wasn't the time to pry. The fog swirled suddenly, as a heavy chain rattled above. Ashford looked up in time, to see a massive shipping container swinging toward them, suspended from one of the cranes. "Move!" Kara shoved him clear as the container slammed into the loader, the impact reverberating through the steel. The loader groaned, twisted and toppled, cutting off one of their escape routes entirely. From somewhere in the mist, a flare hissed to life, green light staining the fog, casting everything in an eerie glow. Shadows moved in it, 3, 4, maybe more. Kara checked her mag, then looked at Ashford. "They're not here to kill us quick." Ashford knew what that meant: capture, interrogation, or worse. "Then we don't give them the chance," he said. Kara's faint smile was the first he'd seen since the bar. "Good, let's make them regret coming close." They stepped out from cover together, weapons up, cutting through the green-lit fog one shot at a time. Each shadow that fell made Wraith's voice sharpen, the amusement fading, replaced by something harder, impatience. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the gunfire stopped. The fog seemed to close in again, swallowing the sound. "Kara," Wraith's voice said, "closer now. This ends where it started." Ashford felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Whatever was about to happen next, it wasn't going to be in the fog. The mist thinned as they followed the sound of Wraith's voice, each step pulling them deeper into the skeletal remains of the shipyard. The green flare light faded behind them, replaced by a pale, moonlit glow that made every rusted beam look like a bone in some dead giant's ribcage. Kara led the way, her stride sure, though Ashford could feel the tension radiating from her like heat. This wasn't just enemy territory, this was something worse. They came to a low, corrugated metal building, its sliding doors hanging crooked on their rails. Faded hazard paint still clung to the edges, and a weathered sign above read, "Dry Docks New." Kara stopped just short of the entrance. Ashford noticed her hand tighten on the grip of her pistol. "You know this place," he said. Her jaw flexed. "This is where it happened." Before he could ask, Wraith's voice cut in from inside, no longer echoing, just there, close enough that it felt like he could be standing right behind the door. "Come in, Kara, I've even left the lights on." A faint flickering glow spilled out from the crack in the doorway. Ashford glanced at her. "You sure about this?" She didn't answer. Instead she pushed the door wide and stepped into the building. The interior reeked of rust, oil and stagnant seawater. A single floodlight hung from the rafters, swinging slightly, casting restless shadows across the gutted hull of a half-finished patrol boat in the center of the dry dock. Metal catwalks lined the walls, their grates groaning under the weight of unseen footsteps. Ashford moved in behind her, scanning the high angles. "Kara talked to me. What happened here?" She didn't look at him. "This is where Ghost Tide died." The words hit harder than he expected. She walked toward the patrol boat, her boots ringing against the steel deck. "I was 19, green, eager, thought I was invincible. We came here on intel about a stolen weapon shipment, but it was a setup." Her eyes tracked the shadows moving on the catwalk above. "Half my team went down in the first 2 minutes. The rest, Wraith wanted alive, for the branding." Ashford's gaze flicked to her scar. "He did that to you here." She nodded once, marked us like trophies, said it was so we'd remember who let us live. Her voice went quieter. "Only I didn't stay marked. I came back, took 4 of his men before I made it out, but I never found him." A slow clap echoed from the catwalk above, sharp against the steel walls. Wraith stepped into the floodlight's reach, a black combat rig over gray fatigues, face half hidden by a mesh mask. Even from here, his presence was a blade's edge, controlled, deliberate, dangerous. "You've grown," he called down, "sharper, meaner. I almost respect it." Ashford raised his pistol, but Wraith didn't flinch. Instead he gestured subtly. From the shadows, more figures emerged on the catwalks, half a dozen, rifles slung but ready. Kara's eyes never left Wraith. "You lured me here to finish what you started." He tilted his head slightly. "No, I lured you here because you took something from Black Reef, and now, you're going to give it back." Ashford glanced at Kara, catching the flicker of guilt in her expression. "What did you take?" She didn't answer, and in that silence, Wraith smiled faintly beneath the mask. "Seal the exits." The grinding of metal on metal filled the air as the dry dock's doors began to slide shut. The sound was final, like the closing of a tomb. Ashford shifted his stance, checking their angles. "Kara," he said under his breath, "we're not talking our way out of this." Her grip tightened on her pistol. "Good," she murmured, "because I'm done talking." The last inch of daylight vanished as the dry dock doors slammed shut. The heavy locks clanged into place, their echoes rolling through the steel chamber. Overhead the low hum of a generator kicked in, feeding the single swaying floodlight that bathed the half-finished patrol boat in a harsh cone of light. Kara and Ashford stood back to back at the center of the deck. The elevated catwalks above bristled with armed silhouettes, rifles glinting in the dim glow. Wraith leaned on the railing like a man watching a prize fight he'd already paid for. "You're surrounded," he said, his voice smooth and certain. "This doesn't have to be hard." Kara's answer was a single sharp shot upward. The round clipped the railing inches from his hand, sending sparks into the shadows. "All these years," she called, "and you still think I'm the one cornered." The floodlight flickered briefly, just enough for Ashford to notice the crane's hook dangling from the rafters above the patrol boat. He caught Kara's eye and jerked his chin toward it. She gave the faintest nod. The first burst of gunfire came from their left, chattering down into the deck. Ashford dove behind a rusted crate, returning fire with short, controlled bursts that dropped one man from the catwalk. His body hit the deck with a metallic thud. Kara moved fast, sprinting toward the patrol boat's boarding ramp. A hail of rounds chased her, sparking off the steel, but she slid behind the boat's bow and came up firing, forcing the shooters to duck. Ashford took the opportunity to advance along the starboard side, weaving between stacked tool chests and welding tanks. One attacker leaned too far over the railing to track Kara, and Ashford's shot caught him clean in the chest. The floodlight sputtered again, plunging half the dry dock into shadow. Kara used the cover to leap onto the patrol boat's deck, grabbing the crane's dangling hook. She swung it toward the catwalk above, the chain clanging loud enough to draw every rifle barrel in the room toward her. "Now, Chief," she shouted. Ashford understood instantly. He spun and fired at the generator perched on the far catwalk support. The round punched into it, and the light exploded, plunging the entire chamber into near darkness. The gunfire faltered as the shooters lost their sight lines. Kara swung the crane hook upward, letting it smash into the catwalk supports. Steel screamed as the section buckled, sending 2 of Wraith's men crashing to the deck below. Ashford closed the distance to the patrol boat and vaulted aboard, landing beside her. Plan? He asked between breaths. Stay alive long enough to take him, she said, eyes scanning the shadows for Wraith. But Wraith was already moving, dropping from the catwalk to the patrol boat's stern with a predator's grace. In the dim light, his silhouette was broad-shouldered, fluid and unhurried, like a man who'd never lost a fight he'd walked into. Kara turned to face him, pistol up. Let's finish it. Wraith didn't raise his weapon. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low enough that Ashford had to strain to hear. You've been running from this moment for years, Kara. You think killing me will erase it. It won't. You'll still see their faces every time you close your eyes. Her hands didn't shake, but Ashford saw the flicker in her eyes. This was more than a mission. It was a wound that had never healed. I don't want to erase it, she said. I want to make sure it never happens again. Wraith moved suddenly, faster than Ashford thought possible. The pistol clattered from Kara's hand as he struck her wrist and shoved her hard against the bulkhead. Ashford lunged, but Wraith met him with a sharp elbow that drove the air from his lungs. For a moment it was chaos, three bodies colliding in the narrow space, steel ringing under their boots. Then Kara caught Wraith's arm mid-strike, twisted hard, and drove her knee into his ribs. Ashford followed with a hammering right cross that sent the masked man stumbling back toward the railing. Gunfire erupted again from above, as the remaining shooters tried to suppress them. Ashford grabbed Kara by the arm, pulling her toward the crane's chain. We need out, now. She hesitated, her eyes locked on Wraith. He was already recovering, straightening slowly, the mask tilting just enough for Ashford to see the curve of a smile beneath it. This isn't over, Wraith said. Kara's answer was a sharp kick to the crane release lever. The chain whipped upward, jerking them off the patrol boat and into the shadows of the rafters. Bullets chased them, but by the time they hit the far catwalk, they were already running for the maintenance hatch. The heavy door slammed shut behind them. For the first time in hours, the world was silent except for their breathing. Ashford leaned against the wall. You going to tell me what he meant back there? Kara didn't look at him. Not yet, but I will if we live long enough to need it. The maintenance tunnel was a narrow sweating vein of concrete running beneath the shipyard, lit only by the sickly yellow glow of bare bulbs strung at uneven intervals. The air was thick with the smell of salt water and rust, every drip from the ceiling echoing down the claustrophobic passage. Ashford kept pace behind Kara, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. He could still hear faint distant thuds above them, the sound of Wraith's men sweeping the upper levels, searching for a way down. You going to tell me now? He asked, his voice low. Kara didn't slow. What I took from Black Reef wasn't a weapon, not in the conventional sense. Ashford frowned. Then what was it? She glanced back at him, her eyes unreadable. A ledger, a record of every off-the-books operation Ghost Tide ever carried out. Names, dates, targets, and the people who paid for them. Ashford stopped walking for half a second. That's not just evidence, that's a death sentence for half the intelligence community. Kara's tone was matter-of-fact. Exactly. Which is why Wraith wants it. With that ledger he can control anyone who's ever operated in the shadows. Governments, generals, corporations, it's all there. Ashford's mind churned. That kind of leverage, it's not just blackmail, it's power. Kara kept moving, and he'll kill everyone who's ever touched it. Including me. Including you, now that you've heard about it. They turned a corner, and the tunnel opened into a junction where four passages met. Kara slowed, scanning the floor, footprints in the dust, fresh. She motioned for Ashford to cut his light. From somewhere ahead, a faint metallic scrape. Ashford raised his pistol. Two shadows detached from the far wall, moving low and fast. The first man lunged at Kara with a knife. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and slammed him face first into the concrete wall. The second came at Ashford, but the SEAL's training took over. He trapped the man's arm, spun him, and drove a knee into his kidney, before finishing it with a sharp blow to the back of the head. The tunnel was silent again, except for their breathing. Kara checked the men for comms. Both had earpieces, still active. She plucked one out and held it to her ear. Static at first, then Wraith's voice, calm as ever. You can run through every hole in that shipyard, Kara. I'll still be the one closing the last door. She tossed the earpiece into a puddle, killing the signal. We keep moving. They pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth. The deeper they went, the colder it got, the walls slick with condensation. Ashford realized the faint rumble under his boots wasn't machinery, it was the tide, moving against the outer walls. This lead anywhere useful? He asked. Kara nodded toward a faint rectangle of light at the far end. There's a maintenance pier that opens into the bay. We get there, we can disappear for a while. They were 30 yards from the exit, when the lights overhead blinked out, plunging the tunnel into darkness. Ashford froze. Please tell me that's not, a hiss from behind. Then the unmistakable echo of boots on concrete, closing fast. Kara's hand brushed his arm. Go, now. They broke into a run, their footsteps pounding in sync with the rush of water outside. The rectangle of light grew brighter, closer, until a figure stepped into it, blocking the way out. The man was broad, his shoulders filling the tunnel. A submachine gun hung from his chest, but it was the shape of the mask he wore that froze Ashford's blood. It wasn't Wraith's, but it was close, sleek, black, faceless. End of the line, the man said. Ashford's mind calculated angles, distance and odds in a flash. Kara's did something else entirely. Her hand reached to her boot, pulling free a blade that caught what little light there was. No, she said, stepping forward. This is where we take another one off the board. The man in the mask didn't rush them. He just stood there, shoulders squared, the dim light from the exit haloing around him. Ashford knew that stance. It belonged to someone who had nothing to prove, because he'd already survived the proving ground. Kara shifted her weight, blade low at her side. Not Wraith, she murmured, but one of his. The man tilted his head slightly, as if amused. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and distorted, filtered through a modulator. Ghost Tide's last survivor, he said. Wraith told me you'd be smaller. Kara's lips curled into a humorless smile. Wraith talks too much. He moved first, fast, a blur of black in the tight space of the tunnel. The SMG came up, but Kara was already in motion, dropping low and sweeping his leg. He staggered but didn't fall, swinging the gun toward her. Ashford fired, but the man twisted, the round grazing the concrete wall instead. In the same motion, the masked lieutenant slammed the butt of his weapon into Ashford's ribs, forcing him back a step. Kara closed the distance, catching the SMG's barrel with her knife hand and twisting. Metal clanged against concrete as the weapon clattered to the floor. The man responded with a headbutt that caught her across the cheekbone, sending her stumbling. Ashford lunged in from the side, hooking an arm around the man's neck. The lieutenant slammed him backward into the tunnel wall, the impact rattling Ashford's teeth. The man's elbow shot back, catching him in the jaw, and Ashford felt his grip slip. Kara came in low, driving her blade toward his thigh. The man twisted again, too fast, and caught her wrist. He squeezed until her knuckles whitened, then ripped the blade from her hand. For a moment Ashford saw it, the raw strength that wasn't just training, but conditioning, the kind designed for soldiers who lived in shadows. This wasn't a standard mercenary. This was one of Wraith's inner circle. The man tossed the knife behind him and came forward in a sudden flurry of blows, palm strikes, elbows, knees, forcing Kara and Ashford back step by step. But he'd made one mistake. He was focused entirely on Kara. Ashford shifted his stance, waiting for the opening. When it came a slight turn of the man's head toward Kara, Ashford drove forward, hooking his leg behind the lieutenant's, and shoving with his full weight. The man went down hard, his helmeted head cracking against the wet concrete. Kara didn't waste the moment. She snatched Ashford's sidearm from his belt and pressed it to the man's temple. Take off the mask. The lieutenant didn't move. Through the black visor, Ashford saw the faintest reflection of his own face. Do it, Kara repeated, her voice like ground glass. Slowly the man reached up and unlatched the seals. The mask came away to reveal a scarred face, young but with eyes that had already seen too much. He smiled faintly, even with the barrel against his skin. Wraith knows you'll never hand it over, he said. So he told me to break you instead, before either of them could react. He slammed his head sideways into the barrel, forcing it away from his temple, and rolled. The gunshot was deafening in the tunnel, but it missed, sparking off the wall. Ashford dove, tackling the man, and they went down in a violent tangle. The lieutenant fought like a man who knew every dirty trick in the book, biting, gouging, and driving his knee into Ashford's side, until Kara joined the fray, catching him across the jaw with the butt of the pistol. He went limp, breathing hard. Ashford pinned him while Kara retrieved her blade. "We can't drag him with us," Ashford said. Kara's eyes were cold. "No, but we can make sure he doesn't follow." She slammed the hilt of her knife into the side of his head, dropping him into unconsciousness, then pushed off the tunnel wall. "Let's move." They left him sprawled in the darkness, and burst into the salt-heavy air of the maintenance pier. The bay stretched out before them, moonlight rippling on black water. Ashford glanced back once. "That one's going to wake up angry." Kara was already moving toward a small, half-sunk skiff tied to the pier. "Good," she said. "It means Wraith will know I'm not running anymore." The skiff rocked as Ashford pushed it off the pier, the wooden hull groaning like it might splinter under their weight. The motor coughed once, then caught, its low rumble carrying over the flat black water. Moonlight shimmered on the bay, but the fog hung low, curling in slow, ghost-like tendrils. Kara took the tiller, guiding them away from the shipyard. The skeletal cranes faded into the mist, until they were just shapes in the dark, watching, waiting. Ashford sat opposite her, his side still aching from the fight. "You've been dancing around it all night," he said. "I want the truth. What's in that ledger that has Wraith burning through half the underworld to get it back?" Kara's eyes stayed on the horizon. "It's not just names. It's the operations tied to them. Missions that never made it into any official log. The kind people disappear for mentioning." "That still doesn't explain why he's this obsessed," Ashford pressed. She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, almost reluctant. "There's a name at the very end. One I didn't expect to see. Yours." The cold night air suddenly felt heavier. Ashford's hands curled into fists without thinking. "My name?" Kara nodded. "Linked to something called Operation Ashful. No date, no details. Just your name, a location, and a blacked-out signature." Ashford searched his memory, but nothing came. "I've never heard of it. And I'd remember. Not if it was buried," she said. "There are files even operators never get to see. Maybe they needed you in the field without knowing who you were really working for." The skiff's bow cut through the dark water, sending ripples across the moon's reflection. Ashford leaned forward. "If Wraith gets that ledger, what happens?" Kara's answer was immediate. "He burns the whole network. Every name in there becomes leverage or a corpse. And you." She hesitated. "You become either his weapon or his trophy." They both turned as a distant sound reached them, a low thrum growing louder. Ashford recognized it instantly. Engines. More than one. Kara's gaze swept the fog, and then she saw it. Two fast boats cutting across the bay, their running lights blacked out, wakes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "They found us," she said. Ashford grabbed the rifle slung against the side of the skiff, checked the mag. "How far to shore?" "Farther than we've got fuel for," Kara replied. Her voice was calm, but her grip on the tiller tightened. "They'll try to box us in." The first boat broke from the fog on their port side, sleek and black, the silhouette of a man on the bow, aiming something that glinted under the moon. Ashford squeezed the trigger, and the man dropped into the water before he could fire. The second boat accelerated, cutting across their bow. Kara spun the tiller hard, sending the skiff veering sharply to starboard. The small craft groaned under the strain, the water hissing along its sides. Gunfire ripped through the fog, rounds snapping overhead, and splintering wood. Ashford dropped to a knee, returning fire in short bursts, forcing their pursuers to back off, just enough for Kara to thread the skiff between them. "They'll just circle back," Ashford said. "We need to make them break off." Kara's eyes flicked to the fuel can wedged by the transom. She tossed it to him. "Hope you remember your demolition training." Ashford didn't ask questions. He yanked the cap, poured a slick trail into the water behind them, and pulled the flare from his vest pocket. The bright orange light hissed to life. Kara straightened their course, giving him the line he needed. Ashford tossed the flare into the fuel. The bay erupted in a sudden wall of flame, the heat washing over them as the fire raced outward. The fast boats swerved hard to avoid it, one disappearing back into the fog entirely. The other cut too close, its bow catching the burning slick. The flames climbed fast, licking up the hull, until the crew bailed into the water. Kara didn't slow until the fire was just a glow behind them. Only then did she look at Ashford. "Now you understand why you can't walk away from this." He stared back at her, the weight of her earlier words settling like lead in his chest. If his name was in that ledger, then this fight was already his, whether he wanted it or not. The skiff nosed into a narrow inlet, the dark water muffled by a wall of mangroves that rose like twisted fingers against the night sky. Kara cut the motor, and the sudden silence made Ashford realize just how loud the chase across the bay had been. Only the distant lap of water against roots filled the air now. She guided the boat through a barely visible gap in the trees, the branches scraping over their heads like claws. 100 feet in, the water widened into a sheltered lagoon. Tucked into the far corner, hidden under a tangle of overgrowth, was a stilted shack, perched on thick wooden pilings above the tide. Ashford frowned. "This your idea of secure?" Kara pulled the skiff alongside a small dock. "On paper this place doesn't exist, which makes it safer than most." They climbed up onto the dock. The boards creaked under Ashford's weight, but the shack looked solid enough. Reinforced shutters, heavy locks on the door, and a roofline that disappeared into the black canopy above. Inside, the air was cooler, touched with the faint scent of machine oil and salt. The single room was divided into functional zones, a cot in one corner, shelves stacked with waterproof crates, and a workbench covered in disassembled firearms, maps, and a battered laptop. Kara set her bag on the bench, unzipped it, and pulled out a small sealed case. It was matte black, about the size of a hardback book, with a single biometric lock. Ashford's gaze narrowed. "That it? The ledger?" She gave a short nod. "This is what Wraith wants, and what half the world would kill to get their hands on." He stepped closer, studying it. "You've been carrying it this whole time." "I don't trust dead drops," she said. "Too many people in the shadows have long memories." Ashford gestured to the biometric lock. "You going to open it?" Kara hesitated for the first time since they'd met. Then she pressed her thumb to the sensor. The lock hissed, and the case clicked open to reveal a slim encrypted tablet inside. The screen came to life with a soft glow. Lines of text scrolled up, a ledger of operations, each entry stamped with a date, a location, and a code name. Some were familiar to Ashford, missions whispered about in bars on far-off bases. Others were new, and far darker. Kara scrolled to the bottom. Ashford saw it immediately. Operation Ashford. No date, no briefing, just his name, and a single coordinate string. He leaned closer. He stopped. The coordinates were familiar. It was a place he hadn't thought about in years. "Where?" Kara asked. Ashford swallowed. "A village in the highlands. Small, remote. The kind of place nobody would notice if it burned." Kara's gaze was steady. "You were there." "I led a training mission in the area," he said slowly. "But there was never an op called Ashford." She locked the case and slid it back into her bag. "Then someone's lying. And I'm betting Wraith knows why." Before Ashford could reply, a faint chirp cut through the room. Kara reached into a drawer and pulled out a compact radio. A voice crackled through, distorted by static. "They found the outer channel. We've got maybe 2 hours before they sweep the inlet." Kara clicked it off and looked at him. "We can't stay here, but before we move, you need to decide something." Ashford raised an eyebrow. "Decide what?" She stepped closer. "Whether you're in this to survive, or to finish it." The question hung in the air, heavy as the night, pressing against the shutters. Outside, the water lapped softly at the pilings, but Ashford could already feel the tide shifting. If his name was in that ledger, he wasn't just a bystander.
He was a target, and maybe the key to ending Wraith for good.
They moved before first light. The safe house stood quiet behind them, its silhouette disappearing as the mangroves swallowed the last of the moonlight. Ashford led this time, machete in hand, slicing a narrow path through the thick roots and hanging vines. The air was damp, the humidity clinging to every breath like a second skin. They didn't speak much. There wasn't time for reflection, and every branch snap or bird call felt like it might be a signal. Wraith's men were out there, tracking, listening. "Where's this extraction you mentioned?" Ashford finally asked, ducking under a fallen log. Kara moved past him, checking behind them with every few steps. "Town called Vardos, 30 clicks inland. Old staging ground from when Ghost Tide was still official. There's a rail junction there. One of ours used to run dead cargo through it." Ashford raised an eyebrow. "Used to?" She gave him a dry smile. "It's either abandoned or bait, but it's our only play." The path turned into shin-deep water, thick with silt. Each step became a calculated motion, toes feeling for roots, ankles brushing against unseen shapes beneath the surface. "Remind me again why we didn't take the skiff farther." Ashford grunted. "Because Wraith has drones," Kara said flatly, "and satellite sweeps. If we'd stayed on open water, we'd already be dead." Ashford didn't argue. He trusted her now, not just as a handler or a rogue operative, but as someone who'd survived too much to be wrong twice. As the sun began to rise, orange light filtering through the mangrove canopy, they reached a clearing where the trees broke apart into cracked mud flats. Beyond that, the jungle gave way to a thin gravel road leading into a decaying village. Ashford scanned the buildings, corrugated roofs, peeling paint, satellite dishes hanging limp. "Looks like it's been dead for years. That's why we're stopping here," Kara said, pointing to an old church in the center of the village. "High walls, one way in. Good fallback if they catch our trail." They made their way into the crumbling chapel. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting warped saints across the cracked floor. Kara pulled the tablet from her bag and set it on the altar. Ashford stood by the door, eyes scanning the road outside. "Still think this ledger is the key?" Kara didn't look up. "I know it is, but the real question now isn't what's in it. It's why your name was added without your knowledge." Ashford crossed his arms. "You think I was part of something I didn't remember. I think someone used your clearance. Your unit, maybe even your face." She turned the tablet toward him. "Whoever orchestrated Operation Ashfall made sure you'd never know. But they didn't count on me surviving Black Reef." Before he could respond, a low hum drifted through the air. They both froze. Ashford stepped outside, his boots silent on the church's stone steps. A single black drone hovered at the edge of the tree line, camera swiveling in slow, deliberate arcs. Kara joined him. "They're closer than I thought." Ashford raised his rifle. Kara stopped him. "Don't. It's not alone. You take 1, 3 more come online. Then we move," he said. They ran, back through the village, down a side road that wound along the ridge. The sun was higher now, and shadows were shorter. No cover left. Behind them, the hum grew louder. Drones circling like buzzards. Suddenly the road ahead erupted in dirt and flame. They hit the ground as a blast wave rolled over them. Gunfire followed, controlled bursts from both sides of the road. "Ambush!" Kara yelled, rolling behind a rusted-out truck frame. Ashford returned fire, picking off 2 shooters on the ridge. Kara lobbed a flashbang, the sharp crack disorienting the attackers, just long enough for her to dart forward and flank the group. The next few seconds were chaos. Gunshots, shouts, the dull thud of boots on gravel. Ashford moved with precision, covering Kara's advance, while she cut through their flank like a scalpel. In less than a minute, the fight was over. 3 bodies lay still on the road. The rest had fled into the tree line. Ashford glanced at her, chest heaving. "They're not just tracking us. They're hurting us." Kara gave a grim nod. "Then we stopped playing the herd." The ridge road wound down into the gutted shell of Vardo's industrial quarter. Rust-streaked warehouses loomed like empty coffins, their corrugated walls bent and torn by years of storms. Ashford kept low, scanning for movement, while Kara picked their path through the maze of debris. "They'll regroup," he said quietly. "They'll be back with more bodies." "That's fine," Kara replied, eyes sharp. "Let's make sure they walk into something worth dying for." They slipped into a long-abandoned machine shop. The floor was littered with twisted conveyor belts and skeletal frames of rusted presses. Dust motes hung in the pale light, slicing through holes in the roof. Kara dumped her pack on a workbench and began pulling out gear. A coil of dit cord, a small block of C4, a pair of smoke grenades. Ashford whistled low. "You've been holding out on me. Never bring your whole hand to the first game," she said, setting to work. While she rigged a pair of trip charges to the shop's main entrance, Ashford scouted the catwalks above, finding a vantage point that gave them a full view of the kill zone below. 10 minutes later, the first sound reached them, a faint crunch of boots on gravel outside. Ashford slid into position, rifle braced on the railing. Kara crouched behind a forklift, her pistol steady in both hands. The door banged open, and 3 men moved in with the cautious precision of trained operators. Ashford recognized the way they covered each other. Tight, disciplined, no wasted motion. Wraith's people. The lead man stepped over the threshold, his boot catching the near-invisible tripwire. A deafening crack and flash ripped through the room, the blast wave rattling the windows. The first 2 men went down instantly, their bodies thrown against the far wall. The third staggered back, ears ringing, but Kara was already on him. She slammed him against the wall, pressing the muzzle of her pistol under his chin. "Where's Wraith?" He spat blood, smiling through the pain. "You think he's here for you, he's here for him." His eyes flicked toward Ashford. Ashford froze for a beat, then stepped down from the catwalk. "What does he want with me?" The man's grin widened, teeth red. "You don't even know what you are, do you?" Kara's hand tightened on the pistol. "Answer the question." "He's not hunting you," the man said. "He's retrieving you. You're his insurance policy." Ashford's jaw clenched. "I'm nobody's property." "Tell him that when he shows up," the man rasped. "He's already coming, and when he gets here, you'll remember everything." Kara knocked him out with the butt of her pistol before he could say more. She looked at Ashford. "We can't stay. If he's close enough for them to say that, we're already inside his perimeter." They stripped the downed men of weapons and comms, then slipped out the shop's side door into the labyrinth of warehouses. Ashford could feel it now, the subtle tightening of the air, the way every shadow felt heavier. The hunt had changed. Wraith wasn't chasing them anymore. He was closing in. Night fell over Vardos, like a shroud. The rusting warehouses became jagged silhouettes against a starless sky, their broken windows glowing faintly from the reflection of floodlights somewhere deeper in the district. Ashford and Kara kept to the narrow alleys, their footsteps silent on the cracked pavement. Every so often, Kara paused, listening. The town was too quiet. No stray dogs, no hum of generators, just the steady thump of distant machinery. They followed the sound until the alley opened into a wide lot between 2 derelict warehouses. Floodlights mounted on tripods bathed the space in a stark white glare, casting sharp shadows in every direction. In the center stood Wraith. He was taller than Ashford expected, broad but lean, his face hidden behind the matte black mask with its seamless visor. A long coat hung over combat webbing, the weight of weapons visible beneath. Around him 6 men stood in a loose perimeter, rifles held low but ready. Ashford instinctively raised his weapon, but Kara's hand caught his forearm. "Not here," she whispered. Wraith didn't move. When he finally spoke, his voice came filtered and steady, like it was designed to be remembered. "Ashford," the way he said the name, made Ashford's skin prickle. He took a step forward, rifle still in hand. "You've been sending your dogs after me all night. Why not just finish it yourself?" Wraith tilted his head slightly. "Because killing you now would be wasteful. You're more valuable alive, until you remember." Ashford frowned. "Remember what?" Wraith took a slow step forward. "Operation Ashful.
The village, the fire. You were the one who gave the order. Ashford's chest tightened. That's a lie.
Is it?
Wraith said softly. I have the footage. I have the comm logs. Every man on your team is dead, except you. Tell me, how does that happen without you making a choice? Kara's voice cut through the tension. You're bluffing. If you had proof, the world would have seen it already. Wraith turned his masked gaze toward her. The world isn't my audience. Then back to Ashford. You are. One of the men at the perimeter shifted, and Ashford caught the faint glint of a laser sight sweeping toward him. Kara noticed it too. She pulled a smoke grenade from her vest and popped the pin. The thick gray cloud billowed out instantly, swallowing the floodlight's glare. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks echoing between the walls. Ashford fired into the haze, moving toward the far edge of the lot. They broke into a run, weaving between stacks of rusted shipping containers. Behind them, Wraith's voice carried through the smoke, calm and unhurried. You can run for now, but the truth follows. They didn't stop until the floodlight's glow was nothing more than a pale smear in the distance. Ashford's breath came hard, but his mind was sharper than ever. Wraith's words had lodged deep, a seed of doubt growing in the cracks of his memory. Kara glanced at him, as they ducked into the cover of an old loading bay. You know he's playing you, right? Ashford didn't answer. Because the worst part was, he wasn't sure. They holed up in the skeleton of an old rail depot, on the northern edge of Vardos. The roof was half collapsed, the walls tagged with layers of grillpress, but it offered concealment, and multiple exits, enough to buy them a few hours. Ashford paced in the shadows, replaying Wraith's words over and over. The village. The fire. The claim that he had given the order. He wanted to reject it outright, but the edges of his memory were too frayed. There were gaps, places where whole hours, even days, had gone missing during deployments. Kara sat cross-legged on the cracked concrete, the ledger's case open in front of her. The dim glow of the tablet illuminated her face as she worked, lines of encrypted data unraveling slowly under her fingertips. We're running out of time, Ashford said finally. He's not going to wait. If he's got proof, real or not, he'll use it to take control of the narrative, before we even leave. That's why we don't leave, Kara said without looking up. We finish it here. Ashford stopped pacing. Finish it how? She lifted her eyes to him, her expression set. Wraith's data hub is still in the city. The rest of the ledger's archive is there. Names, ops, the evidence that ties him to half the black operations on this continent. If we get it before he wipes it, we control the truth. And if we don't, then you become exactly what he says you are. Ashford leaned against a support beam, thinking. Infiltration's a suicide run. He'll have it locked down. Kara's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. That's why we won't infiltrate. We'll walk right in. He stared at her. You want to just walk in? Not as ourselves, she said, digging into her pack. She pulled out 2 battered duffel bags, and unzipped them to reveal tactical uniforms, patched, scuffed, and marked with the insignia of one of Wraith's own front companies. Spotters identified a supply team heading in tonight. We intercept, replace, and roll right through his checkpoint. Ashford studied the uniforms. That gets us to the door. What about once we're inside? Kara tapped the side of the tablet. I plant a worm that mirrors the entire data set to an offshore server. Once it's secure, we burn the hub. Wraith loses his leverage, his network fractures, and you get the truth, whatever it is, on your terms. Ashford considered it. Risk factor. High enough to make it interesting. He gave a dry laugh. You always this convincing. Only when I need backup. The sound of distant engines cut off their exchange. Kara slid the uniforms toward him. Time to suit up. They moved out quickly, following the faint glow of headlights bouncing through the cracked streets. The supply truck rolled into view, its faded paint and dented panels blending perfectly with the ruin around it. Kara and Ashford waited in the shadow of a collapsed wall, timing their move for the narrow choke point, where the road curved between two burned-out buildings. When the truck slowed, they struck fast, Ashford dragging the driver from his seat, Kara disarming the guard riding shotgun with a single brutal elbow. Both men went down hard, bound and gagged before they could raise an alarm. Minutes later, Ashford was behind the wheel, Kara beside him, both in full disguise. The checkpoint loomed ahead, floodlights sweeping the road and armed men pacing in precise patterns. Ashford's pulse ticked higher, but his face stayed neutral. The guard at the gate stepped forward, scanning their forged papers. Kara kept her gaze bored, detached, like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The guard waved them through. The gates opened. The stronghold was a converted shipyard where 3 stories of steel and glass grafted onto the bones of rusted cranes and cargo bays. Inside, the hum of servers filled the air, mixing with the faint tang of ozone and machine oil. Rows of reinforced racks held blinking towers, each one feeding into a central column of armored drives at the far end. Ashford and Kara moved with the measured pace of workers on a routine drop. Every step deeper into the building tightened the coil in Ashford's chest. Too easy, too clean. They reached the inner gate without challenge. Kara slid her forged badge through the reader, and the lock disengaged with a soft chime. Inside, the heat from the server stacks washed over them in waves. "This is it," Kara murmured. She moved to a maintenance console, plugging in a small drive no bigger than her thumb. Lines of code began to cascade across the screen. Worms in. 15 minutes for a full mirror. Ashford scanned the aisles, his rifle resting casually against his chest. Every instinct screamed that they were not alone. 5 minutes in, the lights shifted, cool white to a pulsing amber. A voice echoed through the space, low and steady. "I told you the truth would follow." Ashford. Wraith stepped from the shadows between the server towers, flanked by 4 armed guards. The mask reflected the server lights, like a shard of glass. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't need to. Kara's fingers flew over the console. "Keep him talking," she whispered. Ashford took a step forward. "You said I gave an order. Show me." Wraith tilted his head slightly. "You've lived in the shadow of that day without knowing why. They kept it from you, because you were too loyal to question the chain of command." A flicker of motion, Wraith tapped his wrist console. One of the server towers shifted its output to a large wall display, and suddenly, the grainy video filled the air between them. Ashford froze. The footage showed a man in seal gear, his gear standing in a burning village, comm headset crossed. Kara ease. Carb 2. Camera angle shifted just enough to show his face. It was him. Except, the details were wrong. The scar above the brow was missing. The eyes were colder. A devil. "That isn't me," Ashford said, voice tight. "Maybe not." "No!" Reflux. "But it's the face the world would believe." Kara yanked the drive from the console.
"That's it,"
she hissed. Wraith's head snapped toward her. 2 guards stepped forward. Rising, Ashford moved without thinking, 3 sharp bursts dropping them before they could fire. Kara tossed him the drive.
"Ooh."
They sprinted toward the side exit, as Wraith's remaining men opened fire. Rounds sparked off the server racks, the air filling with the sharp scent of burning circuits. Ashford hurled a frag grenade down the central aisle. The blast rolled through the space, shattering glass, and sending towers toppling into one another. Sparks were waving like fireflies, as the core column erupted into flame. They burst out into the night air, alarms blaring behind them. The drive was warm in Ashford's palm, the weight of it heavier than anything he'd ever carried. At the far edge of the yard, a black SUV roared to life. Right behind the wheel. He didn't give chase. He just watched them go. The mask unreadable in the flicker of the burning stronghold. Ashford and Kara didn't stop running until the glow of the fire was was nothing but a smudge on the horizon. Only then did Ashford look at her. Whatever's on this, it's going to change everything. Kara nodded. And once it's out there, he can't take it back. Ashford tightened his grip on the drive. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of choice in his hands, and he knew exactly what to do with it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this episode touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.